Words are the building blocks of our arguments and of our justifications for those arguments, even when we are just talking to ourselves and explaining to ourselves what we think about something. In fact, most of the time, we don't even know what it is that we think before we can articulate it with words, even if it's just in our own heads, in our own minds, without opening our mouth. Thus, words are usually being chosen unconsciously, since even when we phrase an idea to ourselves, it is usually phrased with words. I am writing this essay to the people with whom I share a certain hobby, and whom I have participated with in demonstrations demanding the legalization of marijuana, and shared the general anger over the fact that this wonderful weed is illegal. This essay is not intended for those who believe that marijuana should remain illegal. For those people, I have nothing to say. This essay is meant for all those masses of people who have already long figured out the lie and stupidity behind the criminalization of consuming or selling marijuana. And today, these are indeed masses of people who all express different words and phrases using their mouths and keyboards. Those different words also express a large array of political ideas. Some of them are contradicting each other. Here, I will try and formulate some of those different phrasings and the ideas behind them. First off, there's a difference between using the word marijuana and the word cannabis. The second word is more common among those who wish to shake off the negative image of marijuana, a Mexican nickname for the same plant and the name that was given by the racist American media in the 20s and 30s by scaring white people from a Mexican drug with a Mexican name. Cannabis is a Western word, a white word. I usually prefer using the word marijuana. I like it better. I like the way it rolls off my tongue when I say it, and I don't think that I need to suck up to all those ignorant bastards who don't think it should be legal anyway. Today, it's very easy to say, I support the legalization of medical cannabis, and even I support the legalization of medical marijuana. We can see that the word medical is giving an almost sublime dimension to that same plant. In fact, there are some people who mistakenly believe that there is some cosmic difference between medical and non-medical marijuana. This confusion is a result of words, of phrasing. The words created this fake distinction. So just in case you don't know this, medical marijuana is simply good marijuana. And since you can sometimes get better weed on the private/illegal market, it means that the non-medical marijuana just might be even more medical than the medical kind. This is not about content, but just about representation, phrasing, words, expression. But let's leave the medical part aside. After all, you and I support the legalization of weed for everybody, not just for medical patients, even though we all think that patients should be the first in line to get it, as it is unquestionably a life-saving medicine. But yes, even if we leave out the magic word medical, we still remain with a large mass of people who will gladly declare, I support the legalization of cannabis or marijuana. These words express the support of regulation and legislation that will allow the organized and authorized selling of marijuana or cannabis, be it in pharmacies or Amsterdam-style coffee shops. It may be less easy or natural to say, I oppose the criminalization of marijuana or cannabis. But that is precisely what I personally tend to say and express a different idea. Criminalization is the making of something a crime or illegal. The opposition to the criminalization of marijuana is signifying the opposition to the act of criminalization, to the fact that this plant has been criminalized in the first place, and not the support of suddenly making it legal. It is a recognition of the fact that it is the criminalization itself the biggest problem associated with any human interaction with this plant, a recognition in a historical injustice that started in the 1930s and continues to this day, an injustice that was inflicted on marijuana users all over the world. The criminalization of marijuana has caused the early death of millions and the imprisonment of millions of others. Human beings are being put in small cages, many small cages, who smoke or sold a plant, a weed, that grows naturally pretty much everywhere. Shocking, disturbing, horrific, unimaginable, horrible crime that was committed by the world's government and led by the American one since 1937 and continues to this very day. Lately, after some further thought about the subject, I've decided to once again change the words I use in order to express the political ideas that they represent, of the political position I wish to occupy. I oppose the criminalization of all drugs, plain and simple. This is an opposition to a specific narrative that is concerned with drugs/medicine, words, and their consumption or use by humans throughout history. The modern nation state usually indoctrinates its subjects according to a narrative, a specific way of looking at the world and the logics behind it. One of the sickest such logics that was developed in the 20th century is the one that says that the state should protect its citizens from themselves. This logic usually comes to retroactively signify the justifications for actions by the state that limit the actions of its citizens. For example, when bureaucrats and politicians raise taxes on tobacco or alcohol, they can say that we should drink or smoke less because it's unhealthy. But of course, the raising of taxes on tobacco and alcohol was never about concern to the citizens. It was always just an easy way of increasing the government's income without doing anything. You raise the tax on cigarettes and you get an immediate boost to your annual budget. And this same twisted rationalization described above is the one that allows politicians to say that they raise the taxes for our own good. I oppose this sick logic. I oppose all drug legislation and restriction. I am horrified by the fact that millions of political prisoners are incarcerated for years in small chambers because they sold or consumed drugs, any drugs. It is inconceivable that a person is in prison simply because she sold or used heroin, just as it is inconceivable that a person is in prison simply because she sold or used marijuana. And yes, I put the dealers and the users together in the same boat, because they were always in the same boat, because they cannot exist separately. The consumers need the distributors, and the distributors need the consumers. It is hypocritical to attack the dealers when we all need them to appease our appetite for drugs, and they are the ones taking most of the risk for us. So we could smoke a joint, god damn it. And this brings us back to the whole medical cannabis business. Medical cannabis is sacred because it was prescribed by a doctor. The doctor in the Western world is in a position of a high priest. And when she says something, everybody must bow down. But wait a minute. Those same doctors who now prescribe medical cannabis to a few cancer patients are the same ones who stupidly didn't prescribe them cannabis before. Furthermore, We know that those same doctors also prescribed those same patients heroin in a bottle and brought them to states of addiction usually witnessed in certain unpopular side streets. So why are they elevated to a degree of priesthood? I do not accept their divinity. They are exactly the same stupid fucks who earlier did not prescribe marijuana. If you recognize the right of doctors to tell you what to smoke, you should also recognize the right of telling you what not to smoke. This is yet another form of hypocrisy because the doctor is the same doctor in both cases. What changed? Some regulation or legislation that allowed her to prescribe marijuana? Come on. I do not have any intention of using heroin before retirement, and I have never even considered not putting on my seatbelt before that same age. And yet, I oppose the criminalization of not putting on seatbelts. I can definitely disagree with someone who chose not to put a seatbelt on, but that doesn't mean that I think she should be fined. To give her a fine for putting herself at risk? What business is it of the state if I put my seatbelt on? One of the main arguments justifying these aggressive actions by the state that tells us what to smoke or drink or belt is usually coming out of the mouths and keyboards of liberals/progressives/leftists who enjoy telling me stories about how the state should prevent people from harming themselves because it costs a lot of money to the public health system. Meaning, the public expenditure on healthcare is increasing when people drink or smoke or drive without a seatbelt. But the truth is that this argument is just yet another word trick. If we care about public health services, we should familiarize ourselves with the facts. The facts are that public health services are collapsing today all around the Western world, but not because of smoking, drinking, or not putting on seat belts. They are collapsing because of the continuous erosion in their budgets led by neoliberal governments combined with the constant increase in life expectancy. This same capitalist argument, which says that we should keep public health expenditures low, should actually support heroin abuse and people not wearing seatbelts for them to die. The best thing that can happen to today's public health expenditures is that people will die on the day they retire and don't reach longevity because they wear seatbelts or don't use heroin. And so, I'm suggesting to take the above parameters out of the equation completely. Of course, I do not wish to say that I support the untimely death of persons as a result of an unwise use of drugs or medicines. I'm just saying that the source of legitimate authority over decisions that might put our lives at risk is ours alone. Otherwise, in order to stay clear of hypocrisy, they should also control our eating habits, exercise habits, and so on. So we should ask the state and the doctors to stay out of our plates, cars, throats, or veins. They were stupid fucks back then, and they are still stupid fucks today. They don't know what is good for me. They don't even know me. They surely have no idea what is bad for me, be it marijuana, heroin, mushrooms, alcohol, motorcycles, fattening foods, or water poisoning. So no, I do not want to say that I support the legalization of cannabis anymore. I do not want the government to control or supervise the growing of plants in living rooms or backyards. I do not want the government to extort special taxes from those who sell that weed that they grew. The tax on marijuana should be equal to the tax on tomatoes, and the tax on tomatoes should be cancelled. if there is such a tax. I am not part of those legalization supporters who try to seduce the state by emphasizing potential income from taxes. I question the right of the state to limit the growing, smoking, or eating of anything, including this wonderful and amazing specific plant. I oppose the criminalization of all drugs, not because I think that anyone should use heroin, a destructive drug that harms anything it touches, but because I don't think that anyone should go to prison because of it. Heroin users all around the world are usually members of specific segregated and poor populations and communities. For them, heroin was a reasonable alternative for a crappy life. Unlike with cannabis, nobody today talks about the legalization of heroin precisely because the people who use heroin have no voice and no face. And the problems caused by heroin and heroin consumption surely cannot be solved by putting human beings in captivity. These problems can only be solved through social investments, a structural revolutionary change in the economic system, and the empowerment of discriminated populations. These solutions have nothing to do with heroin. Heroin was, and still is, a symptom, one of many symptoms to structural discrimination and segregation of certain populations. It's not enough that the governments fucked them over and made them turn to heroin as the only solution. It then puts them in jail, puts them in prison for it. Words, words, words.